like crumbs and leaves and dog hair.
Gravy. We got good feedback from episode 20, and we were basically filling in some of the details of Lori dying and then coming back to life and what that did in our lives. It was a real pivot point. And
Yeah.
then go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I mean, I was going to say, for me, it felt like it was very therapeutic to talk about it. What about for you?
I've talked about it for years. So
I mean, yeah, same.
for me, the doctor said, which I mentioned it in the podcast, that you can be drugged and take drugs, which there's a point, time, and place for all of that. Or with this situation, you just need to talk about it. So I can do either way. And so for me, it's not new.
Yeah.
But I've noticed even everybody from people my grandson's age, so 19, 20, to people that are my age and older, the feedback has been, like you said, kind of therapeutic.
Yeah.
But out of all of that, we had been thinking about, okay, one is we want to be a little bit more overt than we have been about what God's doing in our lives. And
Well, I don't think, I think there's a difference, because I think for us, or for me personally, I mean, it's the stuff that I'm working through day to day, and how do I not talk about it because it's impacting me, on every level,
Yeah.
and it's exciting, and it's like, well, I want to talk to you about that. I want to, share more of where I'm at with all of that. So
where we're going to start with our conversation is talking about isolation, loneliness, singleness, and distraction.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was driving the other day, and that just kind of popped in my bubble of just, through various conversations with friends of all different stages of life, ages, backgrounds, and all that stuff. And a common theme I feel like is, how do we walk out and walk through these different stages where, for me, I'm single, and I've been single now for almost 2 years, which is a long time for me. It might not be a long time for a lot of people, but yeah,
It's not a long time for me.
yeah. I mean, and
43 years. I've not been single.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, so that'll be interesting though to talk about, like, someone who has not been single for half their life now versus someone who
more than half.
Yeah, more than half. Versus me, who has been hasn't been married. I've dated and stuff like that, obviously. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack there for sure. But I think that's something I think is important to address, because we're in a time right now in the world where I think isolation and loneliness can be crippling, and it is crippling people, and people are more isolated and more alone than ever before. Well, and I think also, like, just because you're married and I'm single, I sometimes will get in this loop of like, well, they're married, they don't really understand what it's like to be single and to have to, XYZ. But I feel like that doesn't necessarily mean that. I think people can be in relationship and marriage and still be just as, or if not more, lonely, depending on where they're coming from and how they're. One of the surveys I did find was from 2019, and it said that 58% of Americans felt like no one knew them well. So again, whether you can be, that's all over the map, whether you're been married for 50 years, just married, single your whole life, for me, it's 2 years now. It's like, and that's, I think that's different. Like, what does that mean when you feel like no, like they're not necessarily saying they're lonely, but they're saying that I feel like no one knows me.
Most people spend their whole life without being really listened to. And so maybe part of that is They don't feel like they're known because they don't feel like anybody's listening. What's going on in your life that even brought up these topics of being alone and
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a good question.
isolation and stuff?
Yeah, I think the season I'm in now, it's weird because I've had roommates and stuff like that, but I've also lived alone, and I've had this kind of, I don't know, I've been independent, so to speak, for the last 20 years and away from immediate family. So in those kind of spaces, you know, had my own ideas, I guess, of that. But where I'm at now, I don't know if that makes sense, but where I'm at now is I'm with y'all and I'm with my family, but I'm intentionally choosing to keep my focus on God and not date and just be single
Well,
and
what are
be.
the challenges of not being, as your word, independent as you have been?
Well, it's hard to ask for help. It's hard to depend on others. There's a part of me who really does want like my person, and that just that partnership, and that
Wait,
kind
what
of
does that
level.
mean? My person.
Just
Talk about that.
just like someone who you're building a life with, and who you're they know there's a level of intimacy there that you both are cultivating that is amazing. I I like being in relationships. Like I think I mean they're hard. They teach us a lot for sure. Um, yeah, I think I miss that like companionship and that kind of, I guess, just that extra level of intimacy, and not even like sexual, just like physical, like being around somebody and like you're building something together. My last relationship, we didn't date long, and a lot of it was distance, which is a thing for me. So I've mostly dated people who are 1,000 miles away from me,
Well, what's changed then from where you were, say, what have you been here, 2 years?
almost.
So what's changed from then to now?
I mean, a lot.
So talk about that.
I think it's just learning to, for in my past when I would have these moments of in these bouts of being single, I was still really looking for. I wasn't fully single. Like you can be single and say, "Oh, I'm not quote unquote in a relationship," but still have your feelers in a lot of different things. And I it's very easy for me to get distracted and get kind of caught up in that. And it doesn't even have to be a sexual encounter that you're having with somebody. I mean, you're building friendships, you're building relationships, we're interacting with other human beings. Even though I would have these little bouts of singleness, I think what's different about this time is like I've kind of gone through this threshold of not getting distracted and not letting myself, you know,
Yeah.
which is, and it's not about forcing anything as much as it's just like really listening and tuning into what God is saying.
One of the biggest difference that I know of personally with you is your relationship with God has changed. I mean, you've been on this whole triunal journey of your body, mind, and spirit.
Mhm.
And from the distance, or as your father, I can see it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. But what's it like for you?
I mean, it's amazing too. I mean, I think the difference too is back in Port Angeles when I was going through a lot of my healing and coming back to God and to my faith. I was doing it pretty. I mean, I had my tight knit close friends, and thank God for them. But I wasn't doing it like communally, really. I was very quiet about that, and not as expressive about where I was, so I think that's a big difference is being more open to sharing my journey and sharing my faith with those around me, and learning how to be in community when God is at the center, and that's definitely comes with a lot of challenges.
Like what?
Just people are we're messy. I get in my head about things. I have fears. Like I have insecurities. There's a lot. I think there's a lot to unpack. There's a big difference from being alone and lonely.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really do enjoy being alone. I wasn't always like that. I'm a very extroverted
Mm-hmm.
person. I love connecting with other people, and I think it was until my maybe 23, 24, 25-ish in Denver when I had my own apartment,
Mm-hmm.
and having that space to learn about who I am, not in reference to anybody else. I think that's a big thing is I when I have dated in the past, I often would get lost in the relationship. That person became my God. And I almost lost myself to the point where I'm like, do I even like that? Is that even something I'm interested in? Or is that just something that I've been, you know, trying to talk myself into? So a lot of this season and back in Port Angeles, it's a continuation of that. Is like who am I? Like dating myself, and it's like what do I love? What do I actually believe?
Go a little, deeper into, you like being alone, you said. Um, there's a difference between being alone and lonely, and how does that play into isolation and
Well,
and the distractions when
Port.
you're in the isolation?
I mean, It's crazy because Port Angeles was a lot more physically isolating. Being in a small town on a peninsula, it's really hard to get to. So I definitely felt a lot of that. But I also had a pretty tight knit community as well. I was very plugged in. And here, it just I'm slow. I haven't been as plugged into the community, but I am in community. So even though I'm alone and single, it's like I'm making new friends. I'm you know starting to put myself out there after this last year of kind of really just being internal. And so yeah, I don't
Well,
know.
how is so I'm trying to dig at this a little bit.
I
How
know.
has your perspective changed? I mean, what's going on with you and God? I mean, talk about it. I know that what you and I, we've talked about how where you've been and where you are, and trying to tell your friends about that is a challenge in and of itself. What's God showing you? Because you're not the same person that your friends knew 2 years ago. I mean, you and I have talked about this quite a bit, but what is God doing in your life that's radically different, or is it subtle, or what?
I
Talk
think
about
it's
it.
like I think it's everything. It's like yes and yes. Like I mean, it's learning to trust him in real time. It's giving all of my worries, my insecurities, my judgments, all of that to God. And from everything from my finances to the thought of even dating, the thought of even like opening myself up to dating men specifically. I have
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot to unpack there. I have a lot of resentment and a lot of issues around that. I've
Mm-hmm.
mostly dated women my whole life, and there's been a current. I've had a couple experiences with men that I don't want to get into a
More
whole lot of
negative.
detail. Yeah, negative, and but like also seeing the positive as well, and just yeah. I mean, I think it's just it's a whole reorientation of me being, a child of God and that being it and not, not fully,
Yeah.
you know, getting lost in again, I
Maybe
talk
the
about
politics of all
the
of it.
politics, the labels, like I don't yeah, I don't identify like it's weird because I don't identify as gay and I haven't for a long time. Um but I still like by association and by my life, like so many people see me as that, even just
Mm-hmm.
by how I dress. Like this world is so fixated on labels and
Image.
boxing that it's like, people
Yeah.
already, and I do the same. I mean,
Branding.
I box people too. Yeah. That just happens. But it's like I'm so much more than who I'm attracted to or who I like.
But
And
what's the evolution of that? Because
I mean, that's been like a 10-year journey for
right.
me. It's like it's not
I mean, we didn't come and go. We didn't. I'm trying to get. I want to ask you that because I think a lot of people struggle with, even some of your friends that I've heard, just been in a little bit of the conversations are going, I don't like these labels. I don't want to be labeled anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in the gay community and not in the gay community. So nobody said, okay, if you're going to follow Jesus, you can't say that I'm gay or you can't say I'm not gay. We heard somebody talking about love in Jesus isn't about heterosexuality. It's about intimacy with the Father,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. I mean, so we didn't say, hey, if you're going to live here, you can't be gay. you know,
Right.
we,
I think for me it's hard because I'm just so at a point, and I think poor Angelus really was the crux of a lot of it. Is like there's so much of the world that I'm just not like wrapped up in, and it's from the politics and the rhetoric and the narrative of you're on this side or you're on that side.
mm,
You're either this or that. And I'm in this space of both and just like again getting on this level of intimacy with not just God but with Jesus and then with the Holy Spirit, and that's taking me into depths of my soul that like I didn't know were possible, and I didn't know like I could experience that kind of love and fullness. And so there's this time and space, like me being single right now, even though I'm single, it's like our house is like we talk
train
about it.
station.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. I love it. And I love the connections and I love the friendships that I'm growing in. And it's important that I have solitude. Solitude is something I think that collectively, I think that's something that people are hungry for.
What's the difference between isolation and solitude? Attitude?
Hmm. Yeah, attitude, perspective. It Isolation, I think there's a level of hopelessness in that,
Mm,
where you're not really seeking something beyond yourself. Where I think solitude, it has this deeper level of like I'm intentionally
mhm.
um, gonna go put myself into a space of solitude where even though I'm alone, like I'm not. I mean, I'm full on focused on God. You know,
Is it temporary or
I
you
think
said intentional is a good word.
intentional. I mean, what do you mean by temporary?
Like when you go in when like you and I and mom we have these rhythms when I get up in the morning, I've got my I've got my prayer beads or whatever and I am silent. I am by myself in solitude and silence as well as a discipline
Hmm.
for 15 minutes. I don't pray, I don't sing, I don't pray in the spirit, I don't read scripture. I sit there in silence.
Hmm.
In the New Testament, when Jesus heard that John the Baptist had been killed, he left and got alone and to be
Yeah.
by himself. For whatever reasons, it doesn't say, but maybe to grieve, to think about what has just happened.
Yeah.
How does that affect him as a 30-year-old guy? So he went and isolated himself, but he didn't stay isolated.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I think it's like the rhythms of that, like needing to rejuvenate and regenerate and just heal. Like when I go out and have that solitude, like I do that daily as well. And I think there's a point where I have to remember to. There's just lately, it's like I've been finding myself so into my phone, and just like when I'm feeling bored or just it's so innate to just pick up my phone and get lost in the reels and go check my phone 50 times a day. And it's like that's not, to me, that's where I have to be like, okay, pause, Hillary, like what are you what's distracting you, or what are you not facing, what are you not. And so having this space of like being alone right now, it's learning about myself, it's learning to love myself, and it's learning to
Hmm.
to love God, and make time for that. Like it's hard to make time for stillness and rest and quietness.
It's totally anti-culture.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And it's like, how do, like, for me, it's like I'm in this place where I feel like it's getting, it's, I think of the healing journey as the spiral. I've talked about it with
Hmm.
a lot of my friends, and I think it's a great image for me. In terms of, there's so many life lessons that I'm coming back to, but I'm at a deeper level now. I mean, I think a big thing is it's the stuff tied with my business and self worth, and um, feeling like I'm not where I want to be by societal standards, and it's like, it's like, okay, am I making this decision based out of fear? Because uh, so much of my internal dialogue, when I'm really like aware and I like press
Hmm.
in and have that quiet space, it's like, oh, usually I don't think I operate in a lot of fear, but then I catch myself saying things, or have, my spiritual direction call, or,
Hmm.
you know, things like that, where I'm like, oh, dang, like there's a lot of fear that I'm still unpacking. There's still a lot of dissonance, over here in terms of money, and how my relationship is with money. And
Are you learning anything about those nuances and the characteristics of God in this journey?
yeah, I mean, heck yeah. Yeah.
What talk about that?
I mean, to be loved and to receive love, to accept love, like it's for me, it's like this dance. Like I'll see myself like, full on, like, exposed and vulnerable and open, and, just like feeling the power, feeling the joy, and the just the love, and then something will happen or something will shift, and I close up. What?
Like this morning when the garage door closed, something caught on this shelf full of pottery in the studio, and it just
Yeah.
shattered
I mean,
everything.
I was like about to leave for a bike ride, pressed the button, and it just was like I heard the loudest crash.
I did too, and I went, "What was
Yeah, that
that?"
came in there. I mean, yeah. So it's like this dance. Sometimes, like I'll catch myself. I always, think of myself sometimes as this turtle, or like, crab, where it's like I
Hmm.
come out of my shell and then I go back in because of some emotion or some fear, and it's this dance with God where it's like every day it's like, am I going to receive his love? Am I going to choose today to accept that he loves me 100%, that I don't have to do anything, I don't have to earn it, I don't even have to like want it, or like
Hmm.
be open myself up to God, but
It
will
doesn't
I?
change how he loves you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so like, I mean, we're living in a world where even your parents who quote unquote unconditionally love you, like there's conditions, because they're humans, and
Hmm.
they make mistakes and they're faulty, and they have their own conditional loves put on them too. And so to even step outside of that and get to a space in my heart where it's just like, even though I'm angry or I'm upset or I'm scared, that I'm still taking it to God, because that's what I've usually done my whole life, is like I'll something, I don't, it's weird because like I'm open and I'm trusting, but when it comes to like the real deep parts of my heart, that's, I've gotten, I have a lot of scars from that. I don't, when I really think about that, it's like I just close up and I withdraw. Like I either run, I run away, or I run and withdraw internally. Like I can just close off, and it's like, okay, this is protective. I'm good. Like, don't open up. And so it's this constant choice every day to be like, I'm pissed right now, or this sucks right now, or I don't trust you, because my car is broken down, or I'm not making a lot of money. I don't
You're
trust
talking
you,
about
God.
God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm going to. And I think we get to experience that with people.
If you're separated out there and you're just dealing with all this stuff and you're doing it in isolation, is that a healthy place to be
I mean,
in your
I think
view?
it's different for everyone. I think I know myself enough to know that when I start seeing myself push away physically from other people, to check it. Is again, I need that space, because again, I almost have to pry myself away from people.
So that might be intentional solitude. So
Right, right.
so isolation would be where you talked about perspective of isolation,
Yeah, because like, yeah, I know. I mean, I have friends too where we talk about, it's like, we'll get in a funk, and it's like, just go into my bubble and stay in my room, close the door, literally and figuratively, And so how do we combat that? I think it's
Well,
scary.
answer that.
Well, I think I wanted, so we always talk about this, it's the having the awareness part of it, and not being run by my feelings, not making decisions based on the current emotion that is at hand. And so having it, that doesn't mean you write it off and you ignore it or you act like you're not feeling that way. It's feeling it, going through it.
Okay,
You
so
know,
going through it.
I love this came up in a lot of my educational trainings is, emotions are, it's, we treat them like it's a cave instead of a tunnel. When it's a cave, you just sit there and there's no way out. And you don't even really try. It's just like a dark, cold, damp cave, versus a tunnel where if you keep going, it's dark. I've been in train tunnels where it's like completely dark.
Yeah.
You don't see the light at all. You're blindly
When you're
walking.
in the curve.
Yeah, you're blindly, and then all of a sudden you see like a little glimmer, and you're like, oh shoot, like, and so you go through that.
If you're in that space of isolation, what are some things you've done to get out of unhealthy isolation? Steps you've taken?
I mean, pray, you know.
What if you don't believe in praying?
I mean, I think of like my time a lot in Port Angeles because like for the couple of years of that, I was going through a pretty toxic breakup, So I started doing things like, I think one again, and I've said this before, but I think getting outside of yourself and getting involved in your community just right in front of you, whether that's the neighbor literally right next to you or plugging yourself into anything, whether that's, you know, through sports, through recreation, you know, the various groups and organizations that run and help a community actually function. Like there's so many areas to plug in. And I think that was like an opportunity for me to learn about myself. Because again, it's like I'm going deeper into loving myself. It's a journey of like really loving myself and accepting myself fully. Because for so many years, like I hid all of that, just back to the stuff with my sexuality is like that, for years I lived a double life. I mean, I came out at 20. My first girlfriend was at 17. So there's 3 years right there that I was completely like didn't talk to anybody about it. Literally nobody. But even before that, I mean, I liked girls when I was 5 years old and I never told anybody about that. And then you go through puberty and you're like, well, what's going on here? Didn't talk about it. So for my whole life, I've built this, I have this ability to say, okay, this is how people view me and want to see me and how the expectation is. So I'll put that over here and it's like a compartmentalize
Like
and then
a facade.
and then I have this internal, battle that's going on of like just being able to be fully present. And I never thought I could step inside of a church and talk to people about my journey with my sexuality because there was so much judgment and biases and just the narrative when I came out. Like, I mean, I was having this, thankfully it didn't happen with me, but a lot of my friends were completely shut off.
So there's real judgment and there's real bias and real prejudice about that. And then there's perceived aspects of that too, right? So
and almost like secondary,
Right.
secondary trauma where you're like, okay, I know this specific friend who literally got kicked out of their home. And it
Yeah.
didn't specifically happen to me, but I mean, I've been out in public where, there was one time late, when I was in my party phase, a bunch of us girls out and we didn't get served the entire time. And I don't think it was an accident. I don't think it was a mistake. I think it was definitely like, we're not serving you because we don't like what we're seeing right now.
So there's that perception in those, and I guess the other thing is your sexuality isn't the only thing that God has been just ministering to you in.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be sexuality. It'd be anything. I mean, for me, it's my identity and what my place is in the world and how do I be what God has called me to be, even at my age, So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, plug in anything, it's not just that. Like, I spent so many years completely obsessed about my sexuality that I didn't look at the other aspects in detail
Out
until
of balance a
for
little.
until the last 5, 6 years of like my, again, how I view myself, my self worth, my self love, um, my impatience, my judgment, of boxing. I was quick to talk about all the judgments and boxes that other people did, but not myself. And so
Mm-hmm.
coming to terms with like, oh shoot, like I judge pretty hard and I box people pretty hard. It's not just everyone else doing that to me.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm curious though for you because this is someone we talked about this a little bit. You've been married for 42 years. So when you think of like I've lived this whole life. I mean, you were married at 20.
7,
That was when you got married.
26.
26.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm 36. So I'm 10 years even further into this journey of not being married and stuff like that. But talk about isolation and loneliness for you? Because just because you're married doesn't necessarily mean that. I mean, doesn't necessarily mean that you don't know what that's like.
I don't recall ever actually feeling lonely. I like being alone too. I
Mm,
have a very high people threshold. I love people. I love
right.
stories. I love even the weird ones, and the people are fascinating to me. Like,
Same.
I actually am learning how to seek solitude. And in the last few weeks, it's been very, very active in the house, which we love too.
Yeah.
But we've hit this place where it's like, I need a break. I need some solitude. And
Hmm.
so there's a fine line between that solitude and isolation. I went through a period of time when I left the church. This was off and on about 10 years where I just isolated myself.
Hmm.
And I've heard it said, maybe it's true, maybe it isn't, but when, in terms of your relationship with God, when you isolate yourself, you're either doing your own thing or God is dealing with you about something, lovingly dealing with you about
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's that fine line. So for me, it's um, when you live in a context with somebody for that long.
I mean, you talking about mom or
Yeah,
what?
mom. When you live in marriage for 43 years, you get used to each other, which you have to guard against. I'm not taking each other for granted. That's an intentional thing too. Um, you get a lot more comfortable. They know you better than anybody else usually. And mom and I are very open. We've always have been. When I
Hmm.
was, thinking about the affair and pursuing that and all that, mom knew. She
Hmm.
just has intuition and she's really got discernment.
Right.
And we taught that was one thing that kept us in all of that was we talked.
Yeah.
And then I count, you guys have heard the story
Right.
about me counting the cost. Way too expensive. But you have to make room for each other. I know that mom, when she gets up in the morning at 5, she needs space
Yeah.
to start her day, to kind of get stuff worked out. And so I try to give her that room. But then you also have to be intentional about making sure that your partner is not isolated or lonely, because you can be in the same house
Yeah, I mean that's what
and
I'm
be
saying.
lonely.
Like that's from your perspective. Like that I don't have that experience except for briefly in moments of relationships where I might have been cohabitating with someone or whatever. But like people can be married their entire lives and still at the end of the day, like you go to bed and it's you and your thoughts. Like it's you and
Hmm.
your mind. Like you're still alone. And so there's even though there's an element where you know I guess what I'm trying to do here is how do we bridge that gap? Because like I'm dealing with it in a different way. I have never had that like
Or
long
how about
term.
ask?
Ask what?
It goes back to what you said about awareness. Like you sense somebody's lonely, talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't have to be theological or therapeutic or anything. Is that just hey, how are you?
Yeah.
And then pay attention to, like when I ask you, like sometimes I'll ask you how you are, and you'll just sigh. Well, that means something.
Mhm.
You can blow that off and go, hey, she's okay. But if you're paying attention, like one of our good friend we've known for a long time, died yesterday,
Mhm.
and it hurt, and it affected Mom greatly.
It is affecting her. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, right
and
now.
so I've said, how are you, and then I pay attention.
Mhm.
And this morning she just needed me to hold her and remind her that I love her and that I'm here,
Yeah.
but also give her space to just process all that stuff
Yeah.
and be quiet. I don't have to fix it.
Right. Well, that's the thing that when you said that, just holding her, I think that's a big, like we should kind of let's go down there. Let's go down that rabbit hole, physical touch. So being alone, because that's definitely something that's been coming up for me is like being alone and being in this space of intentionally like just, on this certain track. I mean, I'm open because it's like I want that. I'm not at the place where I'm desperate enough to go get on dating apps and like
Right.
go start doing all that stuff. I'm just not. I'm okay in this space right now, and I don't want to force that. And it needs to happen organically. And I know, again, it's trusting God in that. Like that time will come when I feel. And I've asked God, like, hey, am I ready? And we'll see. Like I don't know until I have certain experiences or moments where I'm like, okay, yeah, like
Well,
is this a yes or is this a no? And I'll decide when I get there. And so then we get into this conversation of like, okay, so physical touch. Like for me, it's like I am typically a pretty physical person. And I know it, but like I know I have to be careful with that. It's like
right.
I can't go just like
So
hanging
what?
and touching on everyone.
So what do you do? I mean, like with you as my daughter, I usually don't ask you if I can hug you. I just do.
Yeah.
Maybe hug you more than because I've tried to give you space. I've not hugged you as much,
Yeah.
and just be really aware of people's space. It's showing respect
Yeah.
for people.
And I think that's something I miss. I was just talking to a friend about it. Like, I know that that's where we have to be careful. And I see, like, in my Port Angeles community, like, that's one thing I loved about it is that we were touchy feely and we weren't afraid to hug, full on hug. And it wasn't sexualized and it wasn't awkward or weird. Again, you have to do that within, you get to know people and
Right.
you see where their comfort levels are. But being in that community and being held in that kind of way, like I miss that. Whereas I don't necessarily feel like I feel that as much here right now. And I think that that's a difference that I see being within the church is that within the church it's almost like people are walking around on eggshells of like, is it okay to touch somebody? Oh, I can't be fully human or fully passionate or fully expressive here because that's going to give off the wrong signal. And that's a whole thing. But there's a level of emotional maturity that needs to happen within the
Well,
church
right.
specifically, because it's like right now, for instance, like I have a lot of female friends, and that's great. And I think God is doing something with that of just healing that with me of
Hmm.
being able to have these beautiful friendships with other women and have be really connected at a soul level and not have to really take it
Sexualize it.
yeah all the time yeah, yeah, just not take it there. um but it's like you know I don't have any close male friends right now.
Well, it's a whole other issue that's come out in the last 25 years or more, at least awareness wise, is, let's be honest, a lot of times people hide in the church.
Hmm.
Go to church on Sunday, you can put on a facade for an hour, 2 hours, you go home, and it really hasn't affected us. Well, that's changing, and it's slow, and it's happening a lot with your generation. John Mark Comer in Practicing the Way, Tyler Staton, Peter Gregg, um, Kim Zember, people like that.
Danielle Strickland,
Yeah,
yeah, Jackie,
they're
yeah.
talking about these things of really apprenticeship And the point of all that I'm saying is we haven't dealt with our issues because you can hide.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are people who haven't dealt with their sexual predatory issues or their abuse themselves. And I think God is calling for reformation with regard to that.
Yeah.
Is deal with your stuff. I can talk about my rage all I want and never actually change.
Yeah.
Or I can address the rage, figure out why I rage in traffic, and deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like walking through the mess with people, and I think that's what I'm learning too a lot is like the times that I want to withdraw and the times that I, you know, shut off or just shut down, I guess, close down. Those are the moments where I feel like I'm being propelled to go deeper into of like, well, yeah, why am I shutting down here? Or why can't I get past this conflict or whatever it is, And so it's opportunity, I think, to, as we're healing this, it's healing that. Our relationship with higher power, with, I say God, like, is a reflection of our relationships with other human beings.
And vice versa.
And so they're telling us something. It's like, it's information. It's like, so then what do we do with that information? And again, for me, it's like, I get so scared sometimes to hurt others, to say no, to set a boundary that it's like I will throw myself under the bus, or I will change, or I will go against my values. And that's on me. That's on nobody else. I can't blame the church. I can't blame any community that I've ever been a part of. That is fully my responsibility to recognize that and then do something about it.
So we talked about isolation, talked about solitude, and this kind of the similarities and the differences. For you, out of all of the stuff that you're learning, what is Jesus teaching you about him as a person?
You've been saying this, and this came up in Practicing the Way, the book by John Mark Comer. The grace of God, of that it's no effort is going to, I can't earn it, but it does require effort. That's what it is. Like,
yeah, it's not about earning.
I can't earn it. Yeah, nothing I do or say God will love me any more or any less. When I achieved this one thing that I'm thinking I want to achieve over here or whatever, it's not going to, it's hard to wrap my soul around a being that loves you that much, that just as I am.
In totality.
As I am in the process, like literally as I am, where I have questions about and concerns and worries about my sexuality. I still don't know where, I felt pressure like I have to like have a stance of what I believe and what I don't believe. And there's this side A Christian and side B Christian. I'm just like, dude, like, and I said this before, but it's like, I want to listen to the whole freaking tape. I'm not sitting here, we polarize and we jump on these things. And to me, like, sexuality, like, as I've gone in deeper and explored that for the last 10 years, like, I'm learning that is seriously just the very tip of the iceberg. Darby and I talk about that a lot. Like, that is, if we get hung up on that, which I always got hung up on that. It's a lot, and I think that they're important topics to discuss and get in. But I don't have to have any kind of answer, and I'm learning that that's okay. Like, I can be where I'm at, and I can express where I'm at, and I can be okay with I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
I think we're all there.
All I know, and this is something in the last year that I've just is my anchor point, is that I'm a child of God. That's all I can say. You can fill in every label and every box you want about me. Go for it. Like, but I'm a child of God, and that's what's holding me and anchoring me in this like deep well of like insane, outrageous love. And it's so beautiful and it's so fun. I think that's where, that's come up, I a lot for me too lately. It's like I'm so focused and so serious, and I'm so driven with where I'm at with my faith, and I don't want to lose sight of like, I want to have fun, and I do have fun, and like I do have joy, and I want to create more opportunity and space to do that, because it can be, when you're on a healing journey, it can be really exhausting, and and serious, and I'm saying that like you, but me, like I can get very serious and very like, and I am, and I think that's like I'm learning about this version of myself that I'm not. I'm getting to know her. I'm usually crazy, fun-loving, like, you know, jokester, prankster, and loud and outspoken. I mean, that's how I was before alcohol. That's how I was with alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And there's parts of that now, and I think it's just the stage of life that I'm getting in where I am. It's just this level of maturity and seriousness. But you can be mature and still be silly and goofy. And I think I do hold that. I
Yeah.
think that's something that I think throughout all of my crap in life, that is something I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's the grace of God or what, and just and what I see in myself is like this childlike wonder that is important to me. That is a priority.
Well, it is important to God too. Put a period there. We were watching a video by one of the guys that went really far on America's Got Talent.
Oh yeah, Ketterer.
Yeah, Ketterer, and that movie that he did,
Rebels. Yeah.
Rebels, and how they would turn into children.
Yeah.
And turn into it was really well done.
Yeah.
But it was basically talking about how we approach God as with childlikeness.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's this whole, this whole cultural bent on like, okay, you're an adult now, so like zap out all the fun. And like I'm just like, I'm not gonna. No,
I think that's changing.
You can, yeah, I think so, somewhat. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on who you're around, and who is cultivating spaces to allow yourself to be that.
You can be childlike and not be childish.
Yeah.
If you go in Walmart and you're 35 and they don't have bacon, and you fall down on the ground and scream and throw a fit, that's probably not appropriate. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But you can be, a lot of this I think we're talking about is like, what is my heart posture today? Like just today,
What do you do how would you, and we're getting into this quite a ways, but what would you say to somebody, some of your friends who are totally fine to go their whole life and their whole existence being alone?
What do I say to them?
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
how do you interact with them? Like,
I
maybe
mean,
they're lonely, maybe they're not, but you wouldn't know because they're isolated.
well, I think that's where it's about like relationship and asking. I mean, I'm in that place of contemplating like like I said, there's parts of me that wants to be married and wants to have. I really want a kid. I mean, I really want a baby, but
Baby.
but there's the part of me that would be really okay being alone, and and I think where I'm at is like really looking in that and dissecting it from a place of like, I want to be, if I'm going to go down that path, I want it to be out of love, not out of fear.
There are people in your same age group that are terrified of being alone.
Yeah. And so, think about like if that's like the driving force, then, I've done this before, and, know people who have, where it's like, you'll put up with anything just so you're not alone.
Yeah.
You'll be with someone who you don't want to be with or shouldn't be with or whatever it is because of that fear of being alone. I think that's where, again, like there's this idea that if you're not going to get married, that you're going to be this lonely old person who has 20 cats, which to some people that might be what you want to do. That's completely okay. But it's not. Like, again, I think it's what?
I don't want 20 cats. I want 20 yaks.
The yak man down the street.
Miniature yaks that are in the house.
I know that I've had this misconception that being alone or being single and deciding not to get married, is this lonely, sad life.
Existence.
Yeah, and it's not. Like there's so much of us, I think, as a collective, as a body of people, of getting back to the basics of what does it mean to be in community? What does it mean to really know your neighbor and be a good neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
And
And loving your neighbor like you love yourself,
mm-hmm,
which we haven't really loved ourselves very well
mm-hmm.
either.
Yeah, and it's like we can only love others and love God to the capacity that we love ourselves. Back to the singleness or whatever, I just think that that's culturally like that's something I think I've always struggled with, is that like culturally speaking in the church, like or out of the church, is like marriage is the end all be all. And I think that there is this, I think a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of humans want to find a person. They want to
Mm-hmm.
have their person. But when we put the emphasis on like you're not going to be happy or you're not going to be fulfilled until you find your partner for life, your husband, your wife, whatever, like to me that just sets this unrealistic bar. Because I know for me, like when I would get, there was a couple people I dated who I really thought I was going to marry them, and even when they were my soulmates, and even when we were talking about marriage, but even in that place and that space of life, it still like wasn't hitting at my core,
Something was missing.
yeah, this deeper desire to want to connect. And I think that's like where where as humans we're driven to connect.
I think it's a God. I personally think that's a God-shaped hole
Mm,
that longs and seeks intimacy,
mm-hmm,
whether you believe in it or not. I mean, some of those things are true, whether you believe that's true or not.
mm-hmm,
Okay, and then learning that Jesus is not a concept or a bunch of rules, but that he's a person, and that it's not about following the rules as much as it's about relationship.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and so yeah, totally. I mean, that's where I'm at right now, is breaking down all of my judgments and biases and the stuff that happened to me in my past, with the church, of
Which was
breaking.
real. It was real stuff that
Yeah,
happened.
but breaking that all down, because at some point I had to, in my process, I had to come to terms of like, okay, these things I'm saying that have happened, which have, and are very real. These are the very things that are preventing me from getting deeper with God.
Yeah, and in coaching, you and I both use this question is, so what?
Yeah.
And it sounds harsh, but the meaning of it is, so yes, all this bad stuff happened, or all this hurt or these wounds happened. Yes.
And it does happen
Yeah,
still.
and address it and deal with it. So you could say, so what? Or you can say, so, and what am I going to do now?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that I had to lay a lot of that down, because those again, I had built this whole foundation on on these these stories that, again, I could only then go so far. They were
Hmm.
it was a they were it was a wall, it was one big stone cold wall that was preventing me from going deeper with God.
Well, and one thing we've talked about, which may be another episode, but or other conversation, is um, maybe you need therapy.
Well,
You know
yeah,
what I
I mean,
mean?
I
It's
didn't.
like we didn't think that was okay when I was growing up.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't start that process of therapy until junior year of college. That's when I very first went to therapy. Besides when we were younger and we did like the family counseling, and that was
Right.
a crap show.
Yeah, it was a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think where we're at, though, where I'm at and where I think the world is like, how do we grow and meet each other where we're at? Because everyone's just at
Well,
different.
answer that. How do you do it?
I think just by I think by being open, being curious,
Listening.
yeah, listening, being loving, of just like being patient, like
Interesting. I just thought of this when you said that. The scriptures it says, "Love is kind. Love doesn't keep account.
right.
Love does not hold a grudge." I'm paraphrasing. Love is gentle. Love is kind. Long suffering. It's a practice that you have to develop, and that is fruit of the Spirit of God living in us and us letting that exhibit itself in our lives.
Yeah, being it again, like being it.
Yeah.
And again, how, if we're not able to do that with ourselves, how can we do that with other people? And
Yeah.
so, I think too, with all of this, with the isolation, loneliness, whatever, I think too, it's like getting to a place for me where like there's seasons of being alone and there's seasons of not. Like, I think right now I'm loving this time of being single and
Mm-hmm.
having this space. And sometimes the only way we can heal and grow is by actually being in relationships. And that doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
mean romantic, that can be friends. And right now I'm like really cultivating a lot of my friendships.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a way that we learn and we grow and all that stuff too.
It sharpens us and refines us.
But there is something about being in an actual relationship with another person that teaches you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my last relationship, I was very like, I had dated a few people before that, but I was there. I couldn't. I was still not ready to let anybody in. My heart was still very, like, raw and exposed and hurt. And that
Mm-hmm.
was, not just from the breakup. That was me dealing with 10 years of stuff that I hadn't really dealt with.
And some of that was God lovingly revealing that stuff to you.
Yeah. Well, I love, one of my friends said this is like, when things are exposed in your life that need healing, that's a signpost of like, hey, you're ready to heal
Mm-hmm.
this. Like, it's
Yeah.
like God nudging me, being like, hey, I believe in you right now, and I believe that you're ready to handle this kind of stuff, because
Yeah.
it's going to be painful and it's going to be harsh. And a lot of times throughout my life, stuff would creep up, and I just was like, nope, too painful, shove that down, I'm not ready. And again, I think that's where there is this gentleness I'm learning about with God, where it's like he's not going to force those.
It's an invitation, not a
Yeah.
directive.
So I think, but what I was, back to what I was saying with my last relationship, like once I got in that last relationship after this period of being single, that brought up so much for me. And I think we need those relationships to also to teach us and
Mm-hmm.
and to grow. And I think for me, like, I'm grateful for that person and that relationship, and I hope that she knows how grateful I am of her. Like, that's coming up right now. I haven't really thought of that, but like that was it was a very short time in my life, but it was a very, very powerful experience with another person who really helped propel me even further and deeper into my relationship with God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's good. And there's a place in spiritual formation that's called the wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when you come to that place, it's really even hard to articulate that. You just know you're there, but you don't even know how to talk about it. And I'm kind of there myself. And what that indicates is that you're getting ready to learn some new things.
Mm-hmm.
It's a growth opportunity and situation. So,
Well, do you feel like you've stepped through, or do you feel like you're at the wall, or do you feel like you've stepped through it
I feel like
yet?
I'm at it, and my first thing is, well, I'll just go around it, or I'll go over it, or whatever, and or under it, and it's like, no, you need to go through it brick by brick.
Yeah.
And for me, it's another level of intimacy.
Do you think it could be related to that door? Remember we did that?
Yeah,
You had that
Ellie.
vision. Yeah.
Mhm.
So.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I feel like that God is way more patient than I am. When God is lovingly growing us, he's very kind and gentle, but sometimes it's not very nice. You know, he goes, like with me, you can be mad if you want to. I love you just as much as I love you when you're not mad.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to change that thing
Mm-hmm.
that I'm asking you to let me have. We have a friend who was talking about something God was dealing with her in her life, and she said, I don't want to do it. And she felt like in her thinking God was just impressing on her something like, I know you don't, but will you do it for me?
Whew.
And then it's a matter of your will of saying, we got this whole American idea about freedom and about I can do whatever I want, and we're just
Yeah.
almost giving God, everybody and God the finger and saying we're going to do what we want because we've got freedom. And God's going, yeah, how's that working for you?
Yeah.
How's that working for your culture and your society that I love? I'm looking for people who will do what I call them to do and to be more than do. I'm calling you to be my beloved. Get my belovedness on everybody in the world.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well, and what would that actually?
what does that look like?
Yeah.
I think that's what God
Yeah.
is showing us. I
Yeah.
think He's using your generation to do it.
Yeah.
It's amped up. It's like there's a lot of stuff going on out there that's really good.
Yeah. Well, how about we do it? Let's do our takeaways. What are your takeaways from this?
I was really practicing listening. How did I do?
Pretty good. You interrupted me a few times. Yeah, you did good. I think you were asking really tough questions. It was hard. I know you were trying to get me to go deeper, and I think that's stuff that I'm,
Yeah,
I still want to go deeper, but it's hard to talk about things when I don't,
it is.
again, like you said, like I don't have the words, and like I'm going through it, and it's like I literally don't know.
So that's the takeaway. Don't get discouraged when you don't know. I don't have any specific takeaways other than the fact of just keep being who I'm calling you to be. Become a better listener. Look at people and ask me to show you how I see them instead of how you see them. Because there's a lot of people out there that I seriously don't like and don't like me. I get it, but it's like God's going,
Right.
yeah, but I love them.
Yeah.
That's what Graham Cook was talking about. Doing everything right doesn't make God make him love you more. Doing everything wrong doesn't make him love you less.
Right.
His nature is love, and he's calling us to be that in the world with each other.
Yeah.
The
Totally.
kingdom come on earth like it's already come in heaven. So that's kind of what I've taken away.
Yeah.
How about you?
I just want to encourage anybody who's listening, like no matter where you're at, you're married, you're single, you're dating, you're whatever you're doing, like to just press in to the things that make you a little uncomfortable. Oftentimes, like I talk to friends too, it's like I'm at the stage of life where half of my friends are married and have like kids in high school, and half of my friends are still single, and then there's everyone else in between. And I know what it's like right now to be like, man, the thought of like the deep desires of my heart, whether that's who I want to marry, wanting to have a child, or my career, or my passions, my desires, like that seems so far away and so sometimes even impossible. And I get this like restlessness sometimes, or like this hopelessness, and it's like, wait a second, like, God is out of time and space and matter. And so, and I've seen it happen in my life, and I've seen it happen in other people's life where there's transformation like no other. And so it's just encouraging people, like wherever you're at, like whatever you're dealing with, it's just like you're not alone in that. We're in it together, and to like press into other people. Like you might not be able to press into everyone, or you might be having issues with your spouse or your family or whatever, but like it's hard because it's like you're in a rough spot, and it's like I get that, and I go through these periods too where I'm like, what the heck am I doing with my life? And it's constantly like, okay, but can I choose to be loved today? Can I choose to accept and receive love? And again, sounds all like nice and bubbly. Sometimes it's hard to walk that out.
Yeah.
Just leaning and pressing into the growth and the awareness of like, okay, what is this trying to teach me right now?
Well, we might need to talk about this some more, because it's really hard to go be curious and be friendly and be nice when you are depressed and you're hiding in your house and you're lonely and you don't have an impetus to get out of that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's something we could talk about with
Yeah.
some other people who've gone through it.
Yeah. I was actually talking to Mary at the grocery store. I have like my checkout
Oh yeah.
ladies who
Mm-hmm.
I love. And we were talking about I was telling her about the concept ikigai. Have you heard of that?
Mm-mm.
It's a Japanese concept of ikigai is your purpose in life. Like
It's
what
our neighbor. Icky
yeah.
guy.
It's what it is what gets you out of bed.
Mm.
And there's a whole you can Google it. There's podcasts all on this, but they've interviewed. There's this place in Japan where everyone who's living in this area they're over
Oh yeah.
100 years
Heard about
old.
it.
They're Centaurians.
Something like that. Yeah.
That sounds like a
Star
Narnian,
Wars.
yeah,
Star Trek.
centaur. But there's several concepts, so they ask them advice and like how are you living? Because they're not just like hooked up to machine
They're
100-year-old. They're
Yeah.
thriving.
Yeah.
They're alive and so yeah, one of those is ikigai. So it's like what is your purpose? Like what is something? And it could be the smallest thing. It could be I think that's why we love pets so much. It could be
Mm-hmm.
your dog who is your reason for getting out
Mm-hmm.
of bed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's
Somebody you're in a relationship with.
yeah,
Whatever.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and whether you like them or not,
Yeah.
can you see them as the beloved, and can you find a reason to get out of bed?
Yeah.
And
That's good.
yeah. Anyways, I think we're finished for now.
Yeah.
Love y'all.
Love
Take it
you.
easy. Have a good week.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. How do you get that high?
I don't know.